My husband brought his girlfriend into our kitchen while I still lived there. She sat at my counter sipping wine from my glass, smiling like she owned the place. He thought I'd crumble. But instead, I took a screenshot with my eyes and a mental note for my lawyer. 3 weeks later in court, I didn't raise my voice. I raised a clause on page 7 and walked away with everything. I still remember the smirk on Andrew's face as he leaned back in his leather chair, one arm slung over the backrest like he was posing for a photograph of triumph. That same smug smile used to make me feel safe once. Now it curled with a cruel satisfaction that made my stomach churn. Claire gets nothing beyond what's in the prenup, he said casually, tapping the glossy table with one manicured finger. The house is mine. The investment account's mine. The lake house, of course. Also mine. He turned to his lawyer with a mock innocent shrug. Isn't that right, Bill Berkowitz, a man whose entire demeanor screamed expensive litigation, nodded solemnly. That's correct, Mr. Morgan. The agreement was clear and fully executed 12 years ago. 12 years. 12 years of sitting through Andrew's business, dinners of arranging flowers to match his clients' wives' dresses, of reading and rereading his pitches while he flew first class to conferences I helped him prepare for. 12 years of we in public and you're being too emotional behind closed doors. And now I was being dismissed with the same ease he used to cancel lunch meetings. I sat motionless beside Dana Sinclair, my attorney, whose face was composed like marble. She didn't flinch. Not when Andrew laughed, not when Berkowitz called the prenup airtight, not when they both acted as if I were a minor character in the story of Andrew's life. And what exactly does Claire get? Dana asked, her voice calm and surgical. Andrew chuckled. Her personal belongings. The Honda. It's all in the prenup she signed the week before the wedding. Standard stuff. She should have read the fine print. He smirked again. But she was too in love to bother. I flinched at that. Not just the words, but the way he said love like it was a joke. A tool. A trick I'd fallen for. Dana placed a firm hand on my forearm beneath the table. We'd like a brief recess, she said to the mediator, who nodded and gestured toward a small breakout room. Inside, I collapsed into the chair, adrenaline giving way to humiliation. He's right, I whispered. I signed it. I was 23 and stupid, and I trusted him. Dana didn't respond immediately. She opened her sleek black leather portfolio and slid a document onto the table between us. I recognized the first page instantly. The prenuptial agreement. The one I'd never seen again after our wedding week. The one Andrew always said was just a formality. I thought you didn't have a copy, I said. You told me you didn't. So I requested it through court discovery. I've been reviewing it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It's solid, isn't it? I'm screwed. Dana shook her head, a glimmer of something unreadable in her eyes. She flipped to a specific page, tapping her fingernail on a paragraph halfway down. Number Andrew is. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the tiny print. Section 16B. In the event that the marriage persists beyond a continuous 10-year period, this agreement shall be rendered null and void. All marital assets acquired during said period shall be subject to equitable distribution under current state law. The words swam in front of me. Wait, I said. What does that mean? Dana smiled, small and sharp. It means the prenup expired 2 years ago. I stared at her. But he doesn't know. Clearly not, she said. And given how aggressively he's pushing that document, he probably never read it in full. Especially not page 7. My heartbeat quickened. His lawyer didn't catch it either. Berkowitz is new. You said Andrew fired the original firm a while back. This clause. It was part of their standard boilerplate for high-value prenups. Most clients insist it be removed. Andrew didn't. I sat back in my chair, disoriented. He's been moving money around. Hiding things. Acting like he's invincible. Dana nodded. And that arrogance. That's what's going to break him. There was a long silence between us. The walls of the room were thin. I could hear Andrew's voice outside laughing about something on his phone. I could tell him, I said. Dana raised an eyebrow. You could. I could watch his face change. You could, she repeated. Or, you could wait. Let him keep underestimating you. Let him build his whole case around that expired clause. And then when it matters most, drop page 7 like a grenade. The image flashed vividly in my mind. Andrew in court, certain of his control of his narrative, then hearing that everything he thought protected him had already crumbled, and that I'd known all along. I swallowed hard. Let's wait. Dana nodded approvingly. You're stronger than you think. For the first time in months, I believed her. Back at home, the silence felt louder than Andrew's voice had ever been. I stood in the kitchen, my fingers lightly brushing over the marble countertop I had chosen 3 years ago. Veined stone that reminded me of waves of the beach house from my childhood, of something calm and mine. Of course, Andrew had complained about the cost. He always did, until someone else admired it. Then suddenly it had been his idea. The prenup was still heavy in my handbag, page 7 folded open like a secret I hadn't yet decided how to use. The idea of power unsettled me, not because I didn't want it, but because I had lived so long without it. I wasn't sure what to do now that it was quietly flickering inside me. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. My mind drifted uninvited to 12 years earlier. Asterisk. I was 23 when I met Andrew Morgan. I'd just finished my master's degree in architectural history, and he was already wearing tailored suits and talking about real estate as legacy. He made me feel seen in ways that at the time felt extraordinary. Now I recognize them for what they were: calculated, effective, dangerous. He proposed after 6 months at a vineyard in Sonoma. There were violins, fire pits. He toasted to our empire. The prenup was delivered by a courier 2 weeks before the wedding. I remember holding the envelope sealed in gold foil, thinking it felt more like an invitation than a contract. I know it's boring legal stuff, Andrew had said, with a smile, brushing my hair behind my ear. My firm recommends it. Just a formality, I promise. You'll be taken care of no matter what. I signed it 2 days later, barefoot on the balcony of his condo, wearing his shirt and sipping white wine. I hadn't even read past page 2. My parents were concerned, but Andrew charmed them with confidence and catered dinners. My best friend Sophie had asked if I wanted a lawyer to look it over, and I'd laughed. It's not like we're strangers, I'd said. This isn't a business deal, it's love. I had no idea how easily those two things could become indistinguishable when one person holds all the cards. Asterisk. Over time, Andrew rewrote the rules of our marriage without saying a word. It started with the budget. Let me take care of the bills, he said. You focus on your projects. My consulting work at the museum slowly became part-time, then freelance, then a hobby. He was always so polite about it. They don't pay you what you're worth, he'd say. Let me handle things until something better comes along. He started screening my calendar. Do you really want to have dinner with Sophie again? She's a bit of a downer. He'd forward me articles about energy vampires and curating your circle. Eventually, I stopped texting her back. He was never violent, never raised his voice. But he knew how to erase me gently, how to make it seem like I had chosen to disappear. I gave up a director-level offer at the museum 3 years ago because he just launched a new fund and said we'd be traveling too much. We should be fluid, Claire. You and me, nimble. Ready to move. What he meant was you should be available when I need you. And invisible when I don't. The day I found out he wanted a divorce, he'd said it over grilled halibut. This just isn't working for me anymore. No anger. No regret. Just a shift in strategy. Like a stock he no longer believed in. Asterisk. Now here I was 12 years older, infinitely wiser, and holding a weapon Andrew didn't know existed. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder: dinner with Caldwells. I smirked. I'd been the one to introduce Andrew to them. Camille Caldwell once told me I had a rare sense of spatial warmth. Andrew had translated that to mean she's good with couches. I was rinsing my glass when I heard a laugh. A female laugh. Then Andrew's voice. This Bordeaux is insane. I forgot how much I loved it. I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. But then came another giggle, higher-pitched, breathy. Number he wouldn't. I walked quietly down the hallway, each footstep measured. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. As I turned the corner into the kitchen, I saw her, Megan. Perched on one of the bar stools, glass of wine in hand, glossy, blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She wore a pale pink blouse, slightly sheer, and her nails were the same shade as the rosé in her glass. Andrew was pouring wine into a decanter, completely at home. My wine, my decanter, my kitchen. He looked up and flinched slightly. "Claire," he said, voice stiffening. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon." "No," I said, walking slowly into the room. "Clearly." Megan's eyes widened. "Mrs. Morgan, I mean." "It's Miss Novak now," I corrected smoothly. "But I understand the confusion." "It's only been, 3 months since the announcement," Andrew said firmly. "Let's not make this awkward." I smiled. "Oh, I think that ship has sailed. But don't worry, I'll give you two a moment. I just came to grab my laptop." Megan stood quickly. "Actually, I should go." "No," Andrew interrupted. "You're fine. We're not doing anything wrong." I looked at the cheese board she'd arranged on my stone slab. Brie. Candied pecans. The rosemary crackers I always bought from the farmer's market. "No," I echoed. "You're not doing anything wrong. Just possibly unwise. Divorce judges don't love it when one party moves on so publicly. Before mediation concludes." Andrew's jaw tightened. "It's still my house." I nodded. "For now." Megan gathered her purse without another word. Andrew followed her toward the door, but I called after them softly, "Oh, Andrew." He paused. "You really should read everything you sign, especially page 7. His eyes narrowed. I let the silence hang. Then I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself the rest of his wine, and toasted quietly to the woman I used to be. She may have signed away her love at 23, but she was finally learning to reclaim her power. Megan paused in the doorway, torn between embarrassment and defiance. She clutched her purse like it was armor, her gaze flicking between me and Andrew as if trying to calculate whose approval she needed more. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Andrew broke the silence first. "Claire, there's no reason to make a scene." I smiled softly, deliberately. "I'm not making a scene. I'm making a record." I slid my phone from the counter and tapped the voice recorder. "Just documenting per my attorney's instructions." Andrew's face twitched. "That's unnecessary." "That's subjective," I replied, letting the recorder capture every syllable. "And since I'm still legally residing in this home, anything said or done in this space is subject to documentation." Megan cleared her throat. I didn't know you still lived here." I turned to her, studying the smooth, nervous face of a girl who hadn't yet learned how men like Andrew operated. "Of course you didn't. He probably told you I moved out, or that I was taking time to reflect." "Did he also mention the prenup he thinks still protects him?" Her eyes darted to Andrew, who suddenly found his watch fascinating. "You're just his next chapter," I said, without venom. "I was once too. Except I didn't know how the book would end." Andrew snapped. "Enough." "No," I said gently. "You don't get to say that anymore." Megan took a step back. "I'll wait in the car." "No need," I said. "I'll be out shortly. I just have a few things to log before leaving you two to your co-working session." She left quickly. The front door clicked behind her like a punctuation mark. Andrew stared at me, jaw tight. "You're turning this into a war." "No," I corrected. "You declared war. I'm simply not surrendering." He laughed, once a short, bitter sound. "You think you can beat me?" I didn't answer. Instead, I calmly picked up my pen and legal pad from the side table and began to write. The 11th of April. 5:17 p.m. Observed Andrew Morgan hosting Megan Campbell in the marital home. Wine consumed. Physical contact observed, hand on back. Remarks made indicating cohabitation and disregard for current negotiation process. "What are you doing?" he asked, incredulous. "Following protocol," I replied. "Every detail matters now." His smirk faltered. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt behind his eyes. "Don't worry," I added. "It's not about revenge, it's about leverage." He walked out without another word, slamming the door behind him like a closing gavel. Asterisk, asterisk. I sat in the stillness of the kitchen, heart racing, but not from fear. From clarity. And from something else I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Asterisk. Asterisk. Later that evening, I found myself at the Velvet Room. A quiet corner cafe nestled between the museum and the old theater. The kind of place where time slows down and no one asks personal questions. I'd called her after leaving the house, not Dana, not Margaret. Someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year but who had once long ago pulled me back from a very different kind of edge, Evelyn Carter. She arrived 10 minutes after I did, elegant in a charcoal blazer and flat shoes that somehow still made her look commanding. Evelyn had been my thesis advisor during grad school and later a mentor when I'd first joined the museum's board. She had survived a very public divorce from a media executive, one that left her reputation in tatters and her bank account even worse. Now she chaired 2 arts foundations and consulted for private collectors around the country. "Claire," she said, warmly embracing me. "When I saw your name on my phone, I knew he'd finally gone too far." I laughed, the first real laugh in days. "You always did have witchy intuition." We ordered tea and chocolate cake, and I recounted everything. Page 7. Megan in my kitchen. Andrew's arrogance, the quiet satisfaction of documenting my own narrative. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her hands folded like she was praying. When I finished, she reached across the table and covered mine. "You're doing better than I was at this stage," she said. "When Charles left me, I burned every photo of our wedding and cut my hair with garden scissors." I smiled. "I thought about keying his car." "Please. Be more creative than that." She leaned back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Claire, let me tell you something most women don't hear enough when they're in your position." I nodded, ready. "We don't get justice by being loud. Or by begging. Or by falling apart in front of them. We get justice by rising." She stirred her tea. "You want to devastate a man like Andrew? Don't cry. Don't scream. Just succeed." Her words struck something deep and electric in me. Like steel being forged. "Is that how you did it?" She smiled, slow and dangerous. "I didn't just survive Charles. I buried him in my rearview mirror. Now he sends me emails asking for job referrals." We both laughed. "I don't want revenge," I said. "Not really. Of course you do. But you're smart enough to know it doesn't have to look like revenge. It just has to feel like freedom." I took a sip of tea, letting the heat ground me. "She's young," I said after a pause. "Megan. 26 maybe." "She's not your concern," Evelyn said. "Focus on you. Let him self-destruct. And if he doesn't, then you win by becoming untouchable." I sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing her words. Then I opened my phone and made a list. To do: document every financial interaction. Schedule strategy session with Dana. Finish museum onboarding paperwork. Follow up on Franklin Theater project. Change locks. Emotionally, if not literally. That night, back in my room, I stood by the window as the city flickered beyond. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I pressed record and dictated everything Andrew had said that day. Every word. Every glance. Every implication. Not to hold on to it, but to let it go in a way that mattered. This wasn't just about a prenup anymore. This was about becoming someone no contract could ever contain. The museum smelled the same. Polished wood floors, filtered light through tall windows, and that faint, almost reverent scent of old paper and preserved canvas. A stillness lived here that I hadn't realized. I missed a kind of silence that wasn't empty but full. Full of memory, of thought, of meaning. I hadn't stepped foot in the Jefferson Museum of Cultural History since I'd quietly resigned 5 years earlier at Andrew's suggestion, no, at his insistence. "It's not a real job," he'd said gently over brunch one Sunday. "You don't need the paycheck. We need someone managing the house, the dinner events. It's not sustainable for both of us to be so busy." So I let it go back then. My curating. My career. My colleagues. Myself. Until now. "Claire," I turned and saw Margaret Levin's head curator approaching with open arms and a smile I hadn't realized I needed. "You look like someone who just walked back into their life," she said, embracing me tightly. "I think I did," I whispered. She pulled back and studied me, her eyes sharp as ever. Evelyn called. Said, "You're ready to come back." I nodded. "I'm not just ready, I'm starving for it." Asterisk, asterisk. The meeting took place in a sunlit conference room with floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books on art restoration, preservation law, and museum curation theory. I sat between Margaret and Evelyn while the museum board reviewed my credentials, most of which were quietly accumulated before I disappeared into Andrew's shadow. I expected questions. Pushback. Bureaucracy. But instead I was met with warmth and a kind of understated reverence. "Claire's work on the Westfield collection is still one of the best documented in our archives," said one board member. "We'd be lucky to have her leading special collections." When the vote was unanimous, I didn't know whether to cry or stand. "You start next month," Margaret said. "The team is already preparing your office. Your name will be on the door." Evelyn added, her voice rich with something between pride and sisterhood. I didn't speak. I couldn't. For the first time in a long time, my silence was full not of pain but of something quieter, gentler. Belonging. Asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, I sat in my old favorite gallery. Room 6, postmodern American notebook on my lap, coffee balanced precariously on the wide window ledge. A Rothko canvas bled reds into burnt oranges before me. Once Andrew had mocked it. "It's just rectangles, Claire." It had never been rectangles. Not to me. It was space, a story told without words, emotion without borders. Chaos organized by color. Like me, maybe. I reached for my pen and wrote the heading "First Day Notes." Return to self underneath. I jotted a list not of tasks but of realizations. I once had vision. I know how to create something from fragments. My work has always had value even when it wasn't seen. I am not a ghost of his life. I am the architect of my own. Asterisk, asterisk. That afternoon, Evelyn and I met in the archive room to review plans for an upcoming restoration exhibit. As we handled delicate documents in gloved hands, she paused, eyeing me carefully. "How's the rest of it?" she asked. "The divorce circus still ongoing," I said. "But it feels quieter now." "Inside me, I mean," she smiled knowingly. "That's what happens when you start living your own story again." I nodded slowly. Every day he becomes a little smaller in the mirror. You'll know you've healed when you stop looking in the mirror for him at all. I thought about that long after I left the museum. That evening in my temporary apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes and half-hung curtains, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Not looking for Andrew. Not even looking for the woman he used to see. Just me. Hair slightly disheveled, a smudge of graphite on my cheek from scribbling gallery plans, soft lines forming near my eyes from days of quiet reflection. I smiled. Not because anything was finished, but because something was beginning. The restaurant was small, elegant, and tucked into a quiet street in Beacon Hill, the kind of place where real decisions happened behind candlelight and linen napkins. Claire had chosen it carefully. The same way she used to help Andrew choose everything from his ties to his talking points before meetings like this. But this time the table was hers. The evening was hers. The narrative was hers. Claire Camille Whitman greeted her first, sweeping in with a warmth that made the dim lighting feel unnecessary. Behind her came Alexander, slower but just as genuine, his smile unfeigned. "We've missed you," Camille said as they embraced. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," Claire admitted. "Given everything." "Oh, don't be silly," Camille said, waving her hand. "When your name popped up on my phone, I told Alexander. Finally, the one with taste is back in touch." Alexander chuckled, helping Claire with her chair. "Your recommendations on our main home's layouts still make guests compliment us, and I say us loosely." Claire laughed, easing into the atmosphere. It felt good, unfamiliar but welcome. Like slipping on a favorite coat and discovering it still fits. Asterisk. Asterisk. By the time dessert arrived, the conversation had shifted from art to architecture, from museum collections to historic preservation. Claire listened as Camille described a derelict theater they had purchased, the Franklin and Art Deco treasure slated for demolition, before they intervened. "We want to restore it," Alexander said, "but not just cosmetically. We want it to function again. Events, screenings, performances, a second life. And we need someone, Camille added, eyes glinting with an eye for preservation but also people. Someone who understands cultural space, not just historical artifacts. Claire paused, letting herself feel the moment fully before speaking. I used to dream about projects like that, she said, before life rerouted me. Alexander set down his glass. Then rerouted back. We'd love to have you consult on the Franklin. Claire blinked. You're serious entirely, Camille said. We've always trusted your instincts, Claire. It wasn't Andrew who made us feel understood, it was you. The words hit her harder than expected, not painfully but like a key sliding into a long-forgotten lock. You don't owe him your silence anymore, Camille said softly. Claire swallowed. I used to think he made me more visible, that without him I was. Background. Alexander shook his head. You were always the focus. He just thought he was the frame. Asterisk, asterisk. Later, as Claire drove home, headlights casting long shadows across the wet pavement, she thought about the Whitmans' words. About how Andrew had always behaved as if he owned his relationships, clients, friends, even Claire herself. As if proximity to him was a kind of favor. But tonight proved something else: the relationships weren't his. They were mutual. Earned. And many had been held together by Claire's emotional labor, her attention to detail, her warmth. Not his name on the firm. Hers on the invitations. Asterisk, asterisk. The next morning Claire was packing her notes on the Franklin project when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, she answered cautiously. Claire. It was Andrew. His voice was clipped, businesslike. I ran into the Whitmans this morning. They mentioned dinner. Of course they had. Claire said nothing. They didn't know we were separating, he added after a pause, like fishing for an explanation. I didn't think it was relevant, Claire replied calmly. We were talking about a preservation project. They've asked me to consult. Silence. Then, with forced lightness, that's generous of them. No, she said. It's professional. And earned. She could hear him trying to recalibrate, trying to figure out if she was bluffing. When he spoke again, the veneer of control was back. Well, just be careful how you present yourself. They're still my clients. That old familiar tone, possession disguised as advice. But this time Claire didn't flinch. They're not your clients, Andrew, she said. They're people, and they chose to work with me. She hung up before he could reply. Then she turned back to her desk and scribbled at the top of her notebook, theater project opening night for me. Dana slid the folder across the mahogany table with a precision Claire had come to recognize as her signature. This, she said, her voice cool and crisp, is our response. They were seated in the private conference room at Lockhart and Sloan, Dana's firm. Light filtered through a frosted glass wall, softening the edges of the confrontation to come. Across the table sat Berkowitz, Andrew's attorney, immaculate suit, watch gleaming, and beside him, Andrew himself, back straight, jaw set, and phone screen tilted just enough for everyone to notice he wasn't looking at it. Claire didn't meet his eyes yet. Berkowitz opened the file, adjusted his glasses, and began flipping through the counter-proposal. Claire watched his fingers, slow, deliberate, then faster. Flip. Flip. A pause. A brow lifted. This is quite comprehensive, he said. Dana said nothing, her silence sharp as steel. Andrew scoffed, the sound loud in the quiet room. Let me guess, she wants the house, the lake cottage, and my investment accounts. No, Dana replied. She wants equity, which includes a portion of the marital assets she helped build. Andrew turned to Claire, eyebrows raised. Helped build, he echoed. Claire, you threw some dinner parties and remembered people's birthdays. I built everything else. Claire finally looked at him, steady, unwavering. You built numbers, she said. I built trust. You closed deals. I opened doors. You brought in capital. I made people stay. That's not quantifiable, Andrew snapped. This is about dollars and percentages. Not vibes. Berkowitz visibly tensed beside him, but said nothing. Claire reached for a document. Dana had prepared a timeline of her contributions over 12 years. It listed her curated interior redesign of the Beacon Hill house featured in New England Design Quarterly, her strategic hosting of the Whitmans leading to a 5-year investment deal, Her recommendation of a junior analyst Andrew eventually made partner who doubled the firm's small-cap portfolio. All of this, she said, sliding the timeline toward Berkowitz, was unpaid labor. Emotional labor. Invisible work, but it was work. Andrew rolled his eyes. You didn't even have a real job. You had hobbies. Interests. You didn't put in the hours I did. No, Claire replied quietly. I put in the hours that let you pretend your world was effortless. I designed it that way. His jaw tightened. You're really going to throw this all away for a few dollars more? I'm not throwing anything away, Claire said. I'm taking back what I earned. Asterisk, asterisk. After the meeting, Dana and Claire walked the length of Commonwealth Avenue in near silence. Claire's heels clicked against the old brick's rhythm, steady heart steadier. He sees you as decoration, Dana finally said. And like all men who mistake women's grace for emptiness, he's terrified now that the vase has teeth. Claire gave a small laugh. He'll say, I'm being vindictive. Let him. The law doesn't care about his feelings, only the facts. They stopped beneath a line of trees, leaves just beginning to show their golden tips. You handled that with restraint, Dana added. I would have slapped him. Claire stared ahead, voice quiet. If I scream, I give him proof that I'm irrational. If I cry, I give him proof that I'm weak. But if I speak plainly, I leave him with nothing to grab onto. Dana smiled, not with warmth but with respect. You've learned. Claire nodded. From the best. Asterisk. Asterisk. That night alone in her apartment, Claire lit a candle not for ambiance but ritual. She sat at her small desk and opened her journal, writing across the top of the page. He made the money. I made the man they trusted to hold it. Underneath she drew a line. Below that, and now I'll make something of my own. Claire stared at the subject line in her inbox. RE, final response to counteroffer. Davenport divorce. The email had arrived exactly when Dana predicted 3 business days after their last meeting. She opened the attached letter slowly, letting her eyes move over the lines of legal language. Somewhere near the bottom, it finally said, Mr. Davenport firmly rejects the proposed counteroffer on the basis of the prenuptial agreement, which remains in his legal counsel's opinion entirely valid and enforceable. Claire didn't react. Not aloud, not even a sigh. But deep in her chest something coiled tighter, not fear. Not anger. Readiness. She forwarded the email to Dana with a single sentence. Let's move. Asterisk. Asterisk. Later that afternoon, they met in Dana's corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing with soft light, the city humming below like an engine waiting to ignite. Dana had the court papers ready, a formal request for an emergency hearing before Judge Marilyn Whitaker, a woman known for 2 things, patience for justice and zero tolerance for ego. We'll use the prenup as he intended, Dana said, sliding the file across the desk. Let him hold it up in front of a judge, quote, it cling to it. Claire nodded slowly. And then we turn to page 7. Dana smiled. And then we end it. They filed the request that evening. The court clerk called the next morning. Emergency hearing granted. Friday 9:00 a.m. ***. That night, Claire stood in the kitchen of her apartment, smaller than the house she'd once shared but quieter. Kinder. Real. She was making tea when the doorbell rang. A courier. A small square package. No return address, just her name written in a familiar looping script. Inside, a photograph. A younger Claire. Age 23. Hair a little longer, eyes a little wider. Cheeks not yet hollowed by years of compromise. She remembered that photo. Evelyn had taken it on the day she submitted her final thesis. Claire had been glowing with possibility, standing in front of a museum wall she dreamed of curating someday. Taped to the back was a note. Don't fight for revenge, fight for her. Make the girl in this picture proud. Claire pressed the photo to her heart. It was the quietest moment of resolve she'd ever known. Asterisk. Asterisk. By Thursday, Andrew had no idea what was coming. He'd sent another text. Still time to settle, Claire. Let's be adults. She didn't reply. Instead, she met Dana at the courthouse for their final prep session. They sat under the high domed ceiling of the law library surrounded by worn leather books and the scent of polished time. "He thinks you're bluffing," Dana said simply. "That you're trying to wring out a better deal by pretending you have something." "I know," Claire said. "It's exactly what he would do." Dana nodded. "That's why this will work, because he believes you're still playing by his rules." Asterisk, asterisk. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She walked through the museum in her mind, the echo of footsteps on marble, the scent of old oil paint in climate-controlled air. Then she thought of Franklin Theater, the project waiting for her beyond all this. And somewhere between those two places, one old one knew she found peace. Not because she knew she'd win, but because for once she was playing her own game. And tomorrow morning page 7 would speak for itself. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Claire stepped out of the cab in front of the Boston Superior Courthouse. She wore a deep navy suit, tailored, clean, unapologetic. Her hair was pulled back, her heels steady. No dramatic makeup. No armor, except for the steadiness in her eyes. Dana was already waiting at the steps, a portfolio under one arm, her expression sharp as a blade freshly whetted. "You ready?" she asked, without fanfare. Claire nodded. "I've never been more." Asterisk. Asterisk. The courtroom was smaller than Claire had imagined, intimate in a way that made every breath, every rustle of paper feel amplified. The walls were lined with wood panels, and at the front, Judge Marilyn Whitaker sat already reviewing files, silver-haired, no-nonsense, and known for cutting through posturing like a surgeon. Andrew arrived 3 minutes late. His navy suit screamed money. His smirk screamed certainty. Claire noticed he didn't make eye contact. Just a glance. Then he leaned toward Berkowitz and whispered something, both of them chuckling softly. "Let them laugh," she thought. Asterisk. Asterisk. Judge Whitaker adjusted her glasses. "This is a special emergency hearing regarding the matter of Davenport v. Davenport. Miss Lockhart, you may proceed." Dana rose with the grace of someone who knew exactly how to pierce without ever raising her voice. "Your Honor," she began, "we're here to address a provision within the prenuptial agreement that has direct bearing on the validity of that document. A provision that has been overlooked in prior discussions and legal responses." Berkowitz scoffed. "If counsel is referring to a clerical nuance, I'd remind the court that the prenuptial agreement was reviewed thoroughly." Dana raised a hand and approached the bench. "Page 7, paragraph 16b, Your Honor." Highlighted. She handed up 3 copies, one for the judge, one for Berkowitz, one for the record. Claire watched as Judge Whitaker's eyes moved across the page. Her brows lifted slightly, not in surprise, but recognition. Then silence. A heavy, pregnant silence. Finally, she spoke. "In the event that the marriage shall persist for a continuous period exceeding 10 years," she read aloud, her voice even but cold, "this agreement shall be deemed null and void in its entirety, and all marital assets shall henceforth be subject to equitable distribution under Massachusetts law." The air in the room shifted. Berkowitz blinked. "Your Honor, this language, this clause is highly unusual." "But not illegal," the judge interrupted. "Nor is it ambiguous." Andrew leaned forward, frowning. "Wait, what does that mean?" "That can't be." "It means," Dana said quietly, "that your prenup expired 2 years ago. And every asset acquired during the marriage is now on the table." Andrew turned to Berkowitz, who was rapidly flipping back and forth through the agreement, pale and visibly sweating. "You didn't catch this," Andrew hissed. This wasn't in the original draft," Berkowitz stammered. Dana stepped in again, tone neutral but firm. "Your Honor, both parties initialed each page of the document, including page 7. There's no evidence of tampering, and the formatting matches the entire document. The clause is valid. The timing is verifiable. The intent is clear." Claire remained seated, hands folded in her lap. She didn't need to speak. Page 7 was speaking for her. Asterisk. Asterisk. Judge Whitaker looked directly at Andrew now. "Mr. Davenport, are you suggesting that the document you've cited repeatedly as the basis for denying your spouse a fair settlement is valid only in part?" Andrew opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in 12 years, Claire saw something unfamiliar in his eyes: uncertainty. And beneath it, fear. "This is not what I agreed to," he muttered. "But it is what you signed," Judge Whitaker said. "Which you've confirmed in writing multiple times in recent filings. The court finds that the prenuptial agreement is no longer in force and will proceed under Massachusetts law regarding equitable division of assets." She gavelled once, sharp and final. "This matter is now in active negotiation. You are dismissed." Just like that, it was done. Asterisk, asterisk. Claire rose slowly. The courtroom emptied around her. Dana touched her elbow briefly, a silent gesture of respect. Across the room, Andrew remained seated, staring at the document like it had betrayed him personally. When he finally looked up, their eyes met. There was no rage in his expression. No righteous indignation. Just disbelief. And the dawning understanding that he had lost. Claire turned and walked out, head high, spine straight, heart free. For the first time in years, she wasn't trying to manage a man's emotions, salvage his ego, or protect his legacy. She was her own person. And outside, the city didn't know, but the air felt different. Like something had been returned to its rightful owner. The house was no longer hers legally, emotionally, or otherwise. Claire had signed the final documents that week, walking out with her head held high and a future firmly in her own hands. She now lived in a modest apartment nestled above a quiet bookstore. It had creaky floors, crooked windows, and morning light that pooled across her desk like warm tea. But more than anything, it had silence. A silence she didn't have to fill. Asterisk. Asterisk. Each morning she walked to the museum. Her new office, director of special collections, smelled of old paper and stories waiting to be retold. She curated exhibits, negotiated acquisitions, and trained younger archivists who reminded her of herself once before the detours. But the job was more than a position. It was a reclamation. Of intellect. Of worth. Of time. Asterisk. Asterisk. And then there was the Franklin Theater. Every Thursday, Claire put on her hard hat and walked through sawdust and scaffolding as the historic venue came back to life under her guidance. The restoration team consulted her on design, material preservation, and everything from Art Deco plaster details to acoustic refinements. "You walk like you own the place," the site manager joked once. Claire smiled. "Because I do, not on paper, but in purpose." Asterisk. Asterisk. One afternoon, just after a walkthrough, her phone buzzed. Andrew. She hadn't blocked him, not out of sentimentality but strategy. She let it ring. Then another buzz, a text. "Can we talk? No lawyers. Just us." Another. "Maybe I never really saw things clearly. Maybe I never really saw you." Claire stared at the screen for a long time, her thumb hovering. Then finally she typed, "You didn't, because you never looked." She didn't send a follow-up. Some truths stand best on their own. Asterisk. Asterisk. 2 weeks later, the theater was nearly ready. Claire stood center stage, her heels clicking gently against the polished wood. The red velvet curtain, freshly rehung, shimmered slightly in the spotlight. Rows of empty seats stared back, each one a promise of stories to come. "Ready for the test?" lighting a technician called from the wings. Claire nodded. The curtain began to rise. Not with drama, but with dignity. And as the golden stage light spilled across her, she saw her reflection in the blank screen above the proscenium, not as Andrew's wife, not as someone's past, but as a woman reborn. Asterisk. Asterisk. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the dust and varnish and possibility. 12 years ago, she had signed away her power with a pen. Now she reclaimed it, not with vengeance, but with vision. Asterisk. Asterisk. The lights dimmed, the curtain settled into place. And somewhere deep inside, a new story began writing itself.